steal something from someone who has nothing to steal. That's real.
What's going on, guys? It's me, Bubba213, and welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Now, in today's video, I will be going over damage in Dauntless, how it works, what it does, and how to tell what type of damage your weapon does. Now, when I first started Dauntless, I didn't really understand what damage was and how it works, and the game didn't really do a good job of telling me what was going on. But after some trial and error, I finally figured out what was going on, and now you can learn how to build your weapons properly for the type of damage they do. Now, there are 4 damage types in Dauntless, each indicated by a color. The first type of damage that you'll see most often is basic damage. Basic damage is indicated by white numbers and is the damage dealt directly to the behemoth's health. Basic damage is the only damage that directly affects the behemoth's health pool. Now, while stagger, part, and wound damage all do damage in their respective ways, basic damage is the only one that directly affects it. Basic damage also occurs behind the text that you see for part, wound, and stagger damage. So while you're seeing yellow, red, and blue numbers, there is still a percentage of basic damage that is occurring in the background. The reason basic damage is so common is once you break a monster's part off, so breaking the tail, breaking the head, knocking the monster over, breaking his legs, then you'll see much more basic damage. I know I said it was really common in the beginning, but I meant to reverse that, saying that you'll see a lot of part damage during the beginning of the fight, but once you start breaking off monster pieces, then all that damage will turn to white damage, which is basic and is going directly to the monster's health. Moving on to the next damage, part damage is the yellow damage type, and is the damage type that is used to break and sever monster parts. So breaking the tail, breaking the head, knocking them, not knocking the monster, breaking the legs on the monster, all comes from part damage, and in my opinion is the damage type you'll be seeing the most. In my experience of playing Dauntless, and I'm around level 18 now, so I've been playing for a little bit. Part damage is one of the damages you'll see a lot of the time because pretty much all the weapons do it. Part damage is the damage you should be looking for when you're going for certain monster parts. So when you get a mission and break the monster's tail, you want to have as much part damage as you can because it'll make it that much more easy, or that much easier to break off the monster's tail. Often with part damage, once the part comes off and you break the part off, the monster's behavior will change. And I know that's not really what this video is about, but I thought I might as well throw it in there because once, like, let's say with the Rage Tail Gasher, once you break his tail off, the amount of times that he starts swinging his tail at you will decrease because he doesn't have that part anymore, and it's just not as useful for him to do anymore. One last thing, the sword, axe, warpike, and chain blades all have a plus 50% part damage percentile on breaking tails. So when you're using those weapons to break tails, they'll do it that much easier than the hammer and the repeaters. The next damage type that I will cover is stagger damage, which is the blue damage type. Very common with the sword, the axe, chain blades, and the hammer, but less the chain blades because you'll see a lot of part damage from those. More the hammer. Once you use the hammer, you'll see a lot of blue text, which is you basically building up stagger damage to knock the monster over. You'll mainly see the stagger damage when you're attacking the monster's head or legs, because once you build up enough stagger damage, the monster will knock over and give you more time to attack it. Again, like I said in the very beginning of the video, stagger damage, wound damage, and part damage do not directly affect the monster's health, but all lead to a certain event happening. With stagger damage, that's you knocking over the monster. With part damage, that's you breaking the monster part out. Then with wound damage, we'll get into that next, and I'll pretty much go over what wound damage is, because in my opinion it's kind of more confusing than the other two. Like, part damage is basically breaking off a piece, and stagger damage you knocking the monster over. Very simple things to get a hand of. Wound damage is a little bit different. And with that said, moving on to wound damage. Wound damage is the red text that you see. Wound damage basically increases the damage from other sources after the part is wounded. So I figured that's a weird statement. So once you use, I would say, a pike. Pikes are usually the best ones to apply wound damage. Uh, when you use a pike to damage a monster, eventually it will reach a wounded cap. You will know that cap because eventually the monster's leg will start. It'll look like once the ether is flowing out of the monster's wounded part, the amount of part damage on those parts increases. Slashing weapons will deal an extra 50% part damage to a wounded part, while blunt weapons will deal an extra 25% damage to a wounded part, and so will piercing weapons like the pike. So let me roll it back. Slashing weapons deal 50% more damage, part damage to a wounded part, and blunt and pikes or piercing weapons will deal a 25% extra damage to a wounded part. So now moving on to how I figured out personally what type of damage my weapon does and how I wanted to build my weapons. I basically went into a match, shot the thing because I'm a repeater main. I use the guns really, and on and off of other weapons. But I went in and I shot the heck out the monster and seeing what damage type occurred the most, which is part damage for me. And then I basically made a build around what that was. So in your case, if you don't understand what type of damage your weapon does, and you want to understand, you want to make a build specifically for the damage type that the weapon you love does, just go into a match, pay attention when you're hitting the monster, and once you understand that, just look what color it is. If it's yellow, it's part damage. Blue, it's stagger. Red, it's wound. And basic is pretty much all the weapons do it. So, more than likely, if it's a slashing weapon, it's doing part damage. Pikes are the ones that usually do wound damage. I'm not saying all of them can't, but pikes are usually the ones that do wound damage. And stagger is mainly the hammer, but other weapons can also stagger. So just pay attention to what's going on, and then once you get a hold of what color damage your weapon is doing the most, then you can make a build around it. And yeah, that's really all there is to damage types in Dauntless. I think I did a pretty good job going over each of them. So yeah, that is really it for this video. If you want to see more Dauntless on the channel, let me know down in that description. If you like the video and if you like the way I'm explaining this stuff, hit that like button down below. And yeah, that's really it for me, guys. It's been me, Bubba213, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a fantastic day, guys.